So I got a call recently for a truck that was in D rate, 55 miles per hour. They said that the truck was losing power, and they had the fault code 2631 FMI 1. And so when I got to the truck, first thing it says to check is your intake manifold pressure sensor and your EGR Delta P sensor. Check the ports, make sure they're clean. I actually did find the ports a little bit clogged up, but that wasn't my problem. So after I did that, I turned the engine on and I started revving it, and the code was still active. And I'll show you in a little clip that this hose was collapsing. So when I removed this hose, I saw that there was oil inside of the intake here. So that led me to the turbo. Here's the turbo off the truck, and I'll add a video of me with the turbo on the truck inspecting it there. This nut was backed off when I removed the intake pipe to inspect it. As you can see, the impeller will not move, seized up, and there's a lot of oil passing through. Now what I wanted to show you with this turbo is that it's totally seized up. That's on the back side. That is not supposed to be like that. That thing is totally seized up, totally jacked. So I just wanted to walk you through quickly how to remove and put on the turbo. New turbo. Spinning. So since I already have the new turbo on, I'm just gonna walk you through it, talk to you and point at things, and if you have any questions about anything, you can ask me in the comments and I'll try to answer your questions the best I can. The first thing you have to do is remove this pipe that goes from the turbo to the CAC, and remove your airbox pipe from here to the front of the turbo, which also has your compressor line going to this black pipe that goes here. Once you get those two things out of the way, off of here and off of here on the old turbo, you need to remove the oil line, which is a banjo style fitting with an O-ring on the bottom and an O-ring on the top of the banjo, and that line goes down behind to the block there, and that's what supplies the turbo with oil. So you have to remove that line. And on the bottom here, you see this fitting here. That's your oil drain line. There's two 13mm bolts you have to remove, and there's a gasket that goes here, and that drain line goes from there to the block here. And so that's one 13mm bolt there, two 13mm bolts there. You remove that, just a gasket here on the turbo side. Remove that. You don't have to remove this sensor from the turbo if you're replacing it, because the new one comes with it. The same thing with the wastegate. The new turbo comes with the wastegate actuator there. So what else you have to remove in order to even see this are the three heat shields. There's one up here, one here, and then there's one on the back side over here. So one here, one on the back side over here, so that you can access these bolts or these nuts if you're replacing the turbo. And then you see I have this removed here. There's two 13mm bolts that hold that on, or those could be 9/16, but 13 or 9/16. What I was going to do originally was remove these. These are coolant lines, and this is a fuel line. When you remove this fuel line, nothing comes out. When you remove these coolant lines, you're going to leak a bunch of coolant. So instead of removing the lines, I just removed the whole thing, because I thought I was going to have to take this pipe off, but I didn't. So, but you still need to remove this, because you have to access bolts back there, and it'd be really difficult or not able to get anything off with this in place. So you remove those two, and then these lines, there's one 16mm bolt here that you have to take off, and there's one 13mm bolt there that you have to take off in order to free up these lines so you get a little bit of play so you can move them out of the way. So once you have those out of the way, you have your heat shields off. Basically, the bolts that you have to remove to get the turbo off are, they're depending on how it is. This one was different than what it shows in the manual, but you should have 2 studs with nuts and 2 bolts. Now it might be different, but you have 4 bolts or nuts, 2 bolts, 2 nuts, however the configuration you have to remove here. Now these are the ones you got to be careful with, because these are the ones that are going to want to break. One broke here for me, so I had to, the turbo did come out because it's threaded into the turbo on the front side, but it's not threaded into the turbo on the back side. So even though I broke that one, I was able to still get the turbo out and then work on getting that bolt out because it was the back one, but you wouldn't have that on the front if you broke these ones off. So you remove those 4 bolts, and there's a gasket in between here. Then you remove these 6 nuts, there's a gasket in between here. And then you have this mounting bracket, which you have 2 13mm bolts here, and you have 2 16mm bolts there. And this bracket, you can't just remove these 2, you have to remove them all. But once you do that, that's it. Then you can pull that turbo off. The only other thing that's connecting it is this blue line from the wastegate actuator. So I just removed it from the wastegate solenoid over here. It's a little, kind of like a hose clamp style fitting. And that's it. Then you can slide your old one off, slide your new one on with the new gaskets, get everything worked up. You see I have a little strap here to hold this in place, which I don't know if I really needed it, but it was helpful when I was lowering the old one out and putting the new one in. And now I'm just gonna reattach the oil lines, reattach everything, plug this sensor in back down here where it goes, and plug this back into the that black air box one that comes here. And that's it. That's how basically you replace the turbo. Busy.